Hi, my name's Dave Goulson. I'm Professor of Biology at the University of Sussex and a specialist in studying bumblebees. I'm very happy to be supporting Pollinating London Together, which is a collaboration between the Bumblebee Conservation Trust and the worshipful company of Wax Chandlers and the worshipful company of gardeners. And together they're trying to make London's gardens as pollinator friendly as possible, which is actually a really easy thing that everyone who's got a garden or even a tiny outdoor space can do. Really simple things like not mowing your lawn so often can help. Most lawns, I'm sitting on the edge of mine, actually if you don't mow them, they burst into flower because there's clovers and buttercups and dandelions and all sorts of flowers there just waiting for a chance to flower if you stop mowing so often. So you can have your own wildflower meadow in your back garden. You can grow lots of bee-friendly flowers. There's lots of advice on the Bumblebee Conservation Trust website about which are the best flowers for pollinators. Generally, cottage garden flowers and herbs are great. Don't use any pesticides. You really don't need pesticides of any kind in a garden. Honestly, you don't. I don't use any in my gardens, full of flowers and happy bees and butterflies and so on. And a final thing you might do is put up a bee hotel. Nice little project, great thing to do with the kids. Again, lots of advice to be found online. They're not for bumblebees, they're for solitary bees, which are delightful little creatures. Overall, if you just try and garden more gently, grow some nice pretty flowers that the bees like too, and you'll find your garden becomes a paradise for insects. So let's all invite pollinators and other insects into our gardens and share the space that we live with them. I think that would be a wonderful thing to do. Thank you.
I'm here at Window Flowers with Miles Watson-Smith, and Miles is the owner of Window Flowers. It's a huge organisation, and Miles is responsible through his organisation for so much planting through the city and through London, exterior and interior, and so also out in Buckinghamshire where we are now. And I know that in Aylesbury you do all the outside planting.
We do, and actually Aylesbury is a good example of a town council that we supply all the planting to, not only hanging baskets, but also the barrier planters and even bedding schemes.
Yeah, and I know it looks fabulous.
Well, we do our little bit, Heather, we do our little bit. Yes, commercially, it's a bit different to in your own home, because commercially we have to put in a display that lasts through the whole season. Yeah. And bee-friendly planting generally will have quite short-lived flowers. Yeah. So we've got to choose the planting very carefully. We, as a nurseryman, we have tended traditionally to work on F1 hybrids and rather unfriendly plants. But produce a great array of flowers and really give it that oomph and drama. Yeah. Now with Bee Friendly, it's slightly more subtle, and I think it's. I just hope that the public will be able to look at that and go, it may not be quite so spectacular to us, but it is to a bee and other pollinating insects.
And it's interesting, isn't it, that commercially you're being asked to incorporate this more.
A lot of landlords,
which is really good.
Yeah, a lot of landlords are now taking on the putting bees on their beehives on top of their roofs. Yeah. And the problem is, in an urban location, a lot of people are putting them here, but the poor bees don't have enough. Yeah. So it's up to us as nurserymen, as contractors, to ensure that they get a plentiful food supply.
Yeah, good. But actually, it's easier, isn't it, if you're doing this domestically? If you're doing a window box in your own home, where you can use plants that are maybe shorter lived, but you can replace them more regularly than you're able to commercially. Sure.
And there's less pressure for it, as I said, to look spectacular. Yeah. Let's look at the bees, let's see what they really want, let's plant accordingly. So Heather, I'm just going to run through a few of the mechanics of planting the window box and how you can get the best out of the display and make it as easy as possible for you to keep that display looking good and healthy through the season.
Good, thanks.
The first thing is the location of where you're going to put the box, put your displays. Now remember that you're attracting bees, so you don't want to put it anywhere where the bees might harm people. It seems obvious, but you've really got to be careful of people who might be vulnerable to a sting. Okay, so these boxes can be big, they can be heavy, so make sure they're sturdy. Remember that they've got a lot of plants in there, and you want to make sure they don't fall off, or fall off and off a balcony and onto the floor below. It's again, sorry to point this out, but just the safety is paramount.
Because once you've got water in it,
yes.
Once you've watered it, it's going to be really heavy.
It's going to be very heavy. It's lightweight now because it's dry compost, and it's a nice lightweight container. Yeah. But yes, it could be heavy. Okay.
Okay.
Remember that you've got to water it, so not too far away from a tap.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
And just bear in mind the environment as well. Just think, the more light you can get, the better it is. So a lovely south-facing balcony, plenty of sunshine, the plants will love you for it. So lots of bright sunlight is perfect. Do remember though, more light equals more water, so more maintenance.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the bees will like that as well, won't they?
They'll find it.
Yeah.
If it's out in the sunshine, the bees will find it. There's no point planting it and the bees not finding you.
No.
You know?
No.
Okay. So
you've put peat-free compost in here, haven't you?
I have. Yeah. When selecting the compost, you might want to include a water-retaining mix. Yeah. So something that's got some swell gel or in there just to keep it wet when you're away. All right. Again, the watering is so important. But please, please, please make sure that it doesn't have any insecticides added into the compost. Okay, a lot of commercial compost had this already mixed in, and we clearly want to avoid that.
Yeah.
Heather, when it comes to the container, the larger the better. I've got a backup stand there so that when I water, the soil doesn't all pour down the back of the container, which is quite important if you're watering with a hose pipe out of reach. The container, if I could just ask you just to come in and have a look at that, because those are the drainage holes. You'll see that I've drilled a pair, in fact on each end, about 2 inches up, or 5 centimetres up on the side. And this creates a reservoir of water along the base of the container, which will then, capillary action will go into the soil and into the plants. It also means that when you water it, you're going to get clean water coming down here without any soil or muck being carried. I'm going to start planting, and at the back I'm going to be using these big rosemaries. We're a bit short on stock at the moment, I have to say, because it's late in the season. But we're going to plant 3 of these big rosemaries at the back of the container. We don't need to worry about planting them too well, because these plants their roots will soon grow out into that lovely rich compost.
And herbs are good, aren't they, for pollinators?
Herbs are brilliant. These rosemaries, bees will absolutely adore these. And they haven't got any flower on at the moment, but they soon will. And it's just a Rosemarinus officinalis. It's just a real normal, bog standard rosemary. There aren't a lot of hybrids out there, but just be careful that you're not selecting some strange, weird and wonderful hybrid that won't produce as much nectar and pollen as the other ones. Right, so between the rosemary, I'm going to be using these large pots.
Smells fabulous.
Smells great, doesn't it? And that smells, the lavender as well.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be planting these, squeezing those between. You can be quite tough on the planting. And put those rosemary at the back. I'm probably going to overplant this a little bit, because for the sake of a film, it's got to look good right at the beginning. But ordinarily, you wouldn't use quite so many plants.
No, okay.
I always think, plant less and let it fill out, let it grow into the display, rather than looking good on day one. A lot of people will phone me up after we've planted and say, is that it? And I always say, look, just hold on, just wait a couple of weeks, let it all settle in.
Yeah.
It's not as if there's a wedding going on this afternoon. Let's give it a chance. And I'm still have my hat. I haven't eaten it yet. So,
That looks good.
quite good already. We've just got to now add a bit of colour. Now it's late in the season, as I was explaining to you earlier on.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I'm afraid if Barry was to pan around the nursery, he wouldn't see many plants
No.
here anymore. They've all gone.
Yeah.
It's any nurseryman who's growing a crop really wouldn't want to have a lot of crop lying around.
No.
And you can see how long that's been growing, but look at the root on there.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to add a bit of colour. These are some Bidens, which the bees will love. The basic rule on what bees like is an open daisy type flower, okay, or a trumpet type flower, okay, and avoiding those F1 hybrids.
Yeah, so you don't want those sort of double flowers, do you?
Definitely not.
No.
And in fact, I don't really like double flowers anyway, because the flowers tend to rot off.
And they often don't have the perfume with them, do they?
No, they don't. No, and scent, I think, is quite important.
Yeah.
That lovely evergreen jasmine that we're using quite a lot of now.
Yeah.
It's lovely growing up outside my kitchen window.
Yeah.
You get that lovely perfume coming into the house. Don't worry about planting them too much. You can see I'm more of a struggle getting the plant pots off than actually planting it. Because once we water this in, it'll all go quite well. Right, we've got that. Now I've also got some mauve bacopa in here, which I was just going to pop in here. Not necessarily a bee-friendly plant, but I think we've got to manage our expectations when planting. We've got an awful lot there that a bee would love.
An awful lot, yeah.
And so we're allowed, I think the bee wouldn't mind if we just put a little bit in there just to make the box look a little prettier and not quite so evergreen in nature, you know?
Yeah.
I'd rather have something that had more bee-friendly planting in, but you can't have it. And that, I've got to put one more on the end. I like symmetry in a box. It's a bit like I like edging in flower beds. I think it's important. It gives it definition and it gives it, you can get away with lots of wild planting, but if you've got a bit of symmetry, then you've got something that looks good. The only thing I possibly would have done is to put something a little bit higher at the back there. Just to do it. So there, we've got that. I'm not going to use any ivy at the front at this stage, but you could have used some ivy to cover that up. But that box is so lovely. That's that rust look. I love that. Yeah.
And these look fabulous.
Doesn't
climbing down. Yeah.
Now that will, as I said earlier on, that'll settle in.
Yeah.
So all of that will push down onto there as the plant settles in.
Yeah.
So most importantly now, you would water that in.
Yeah.
Okay. Give it a really good soak. You can't overwater it because it's got those drainage holes in there.
Yeah.
But do remember though that a lot of plants like lavender and other herbaceous plants do quite like free draining compost.
Yeah.
By definition, container planting is all about non-free draining. Okay.
Yeah.
So it is a good idea to let it dry out a little bit, let some air into that compost between waterings.
Yeah.
So don't water it every day, better to water it every few days.
Yeah.
You can that'll need watering once a week.
Yeah.
That's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
So you can go on holiday and come back and it'll still be alive.
Thank you ever so much. So Miles, there are some very straightforward things to remember when you're putting this together. But actually, it is very straightforward. And it's taken you no time at all. I know you've got all the plants here and everything, but it's still taken such a short time.
It's very simple. Heather, anybody can do this. It really isn't rocket science. Remember that all of this is available in a garden centre. They're not expensive, these plants that we're using.
No.
They'll last, the rosemary, the lavenders, they'll last forever and ever. Keep the lavenders clipped back in August. So stop them going all woody and spready. The rosemary, keep it clipped back. Each time you have a bit of roast lamb, just keep it clipped back, and then that forms a lovely dome. And the only thing I would say, these are all annuals, the summer. They can be replaced. In the winter, you could put some little crocus bulbs in there. The bees love crocuses in the early spring, or even snowdrops or anything like that, and then go back into a summer display next year.
That's really good, isn't it? Because that gives you a longer season for the bees. So at times when actually food is really short for them, you can be replacing those plants, as you're saying, and just making sure that the season is longer.
Absolutely. Remember that don't forget the early spring and the late autumn for the bees.
So Miles, thank you. Thank you so much for doing all of this. And thank you, Window Flowers, because it's just been amazing to be here again.
Well, Heather, it's been my great pleasure. And if anybody needs any help, do let me know. And I'll certainly try and reply and give my advice.
Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So we're in the Salters Garden, a lovely livery company in London, and I'm just completing a pollinator audit for them. And I've spotted two wonderful plants here, which are the hostas. And there's lots of different variety of hostas. They can be absolutely stunning during the summer months with their bright purple spikes that come out. And they are excellent for pollinators. So if you have some space in your gardens for a rather wonderful plant, big leaves, big flowers, perfect for pollinators, I'd highly recommend some hostas like the ones we see in the Salters Garden.
So thank you for watching this video, and I hope you found it useful and informative. I think one of the things that's really clear is that there are some really easy wins to help pollinators. Pollinators need food, they need nectar, they need pollen, and they'll get that from all sorts of different plants, but there are some that are a little bit more difficult. So for example, begonias are not so good for pollinators, but you can have a look round and see which plants you can see bees going to, or you can look on the Be Kind website and have a look there to see what plants are particularly good for pollinators. So lots of things that we can do, lots of things we can do quite easily to just help those pollinators along. So thank you for listening, and really looking forward to seeing perhaps some of the things that you've been able to achieve.